This happened in October 2019. I was 32 working remote IT contracts, and I rented a small off-grid cabin near the White River National Forest for 2 weeks. I needed silence. No traffic, no neighbors, just trees and wind. The first 3 days were perfect. The cabin sat 4 miles down a dirt service road, surrounded by pine and aspen. No cell service. A wood stove. A propane lantern. During the day I hiked and cooked over a fire pit. At night, I read until the forest sounds blended into background noise. On the 4th night, around 11 p.m., I heard footsteps outside the cabin. Not animal steps. Slow. Measured. Crunch. Pause, crunch. They circled the cabin once. I could hear them pass beneath the window. Close. Too close. I told myself it was another hiker who got lost. But this wasn't campground land. The footsteps stopped at my front door. There was no knock. Just breathing. Heavy. Slow. Like someone had climbed uphill. I didn't move. After about a minute, the breathing stopped and the steps retreated into the woods. I stayed awake until sunrise. In the morning, I found fresh boot prints in the dirt. Large tread. They circled the cabin exactly once and stopped at the door. I should have left. I didn't. I convinced myself it was a hunter passing through. That night, I locked the door carefully and kept a camping hatchet beside my bed. On night 5, the footsteps came earlier around 9:30. This time, they went straight to the back of the cabin. I heard gravel crunch beneath the kitchen window, then fingernails dragging lightly across the glass. Slow, deliberate. I turned off the lantern and stood in the dark. The scraping stopped. Then 3 knocks at the back wall. Knock, 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 evenly spaced. I didn't respond. Eventually the steps walked away. In the morning there were large handprints smudged on the outside of the back window. Beside them, carved lightly into the wooden siding, were 3 vertical lines. Not random scratches. Deliberate marks. That was when I decided to leave. But when I walked to my truck, one tire had been slashed. Clean cut through the sidewall. Fresh boot prints surrounded it. Whoever had been there didn't want me driving away. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it. I was 4 miles from the nearest paved road with no service and no spare tire. Then I heard it from deep in the trees behind me. A whistle, short and sharp. A moment later, another whistle answered from farther off. There wasn't just one person out there. I went back inside and locked the door. I packed water, flashlight, batteries, protein bars, and my satellite emergency beacon. I turned it on, but couldn't get a signal under the canopy. I stepped into the clearing holding it up. That's when I saw him about 30 yards away, half hidden behind a tree. Tall, dark jacket, jeans, no hunting gear, just standing there watching me. I shouted asking what he wanted. He didn't answer. He slowly raised his hand and pointed toward the woods behind the cabin, then lowered it. Calm, controlled, like I was already part of something. I ran back inside and locked the door. Seconds later, footsteps creaked on the porch. Then a soft voice said, "You shouldn't be here." It wasn't angry. That made it worse. I yelled that I called the police. Silence. Then the voice closer now said they won't find you in time. The doorknob turned slowly. Once. Twice. Then 3 heavy knocks at the front door. Knock. 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 Exactly like the night before. I heard movement to the right of the cabin fast between trees. They were circling me. I saw another dark figure moving through the woods. They weren't rushing. They were waiting. Instinct finally took over. I grabbed my pack, smashed the back window with the hatchet, and climbed out, cutting my forearm on the glass. I sprinted into the trees, not toward the road, but deeper into the forest. Behind me, I heard sharp sound signals between them. Branches snapped. They were following. I ran downhill, slipping on wet leaves, falling once, but forcing myself up. I kept running until my lungs burned. I reached a shallow creek and waded through it, moving upstream before climbing out. I didn't stop for nearly 2 hours. Eventually, I stumbled onto a gravel access road. A forestry maintenance truck driven by a woman named Karen Alvarez stopped when she saw me waving. I kept looking back as we drove. No one followed onto the road. The sheriff later found the cabin door, opened my belongings, scattered the tires slashed. No suspects. No usable footprints. He suggested stress or isolation. But 2 months later, a camper named Trevor Mills disappeared in that same stretch of forest. His truck was found with a slashed tire. They never found him. I don't camp anymore. And sometimes at night, when everything is quiet, I still hear those 3 knocks in my head. Slow, even, waiting. In October 2023, I took a 4-day solo trip near the edge of the Umpqua National Forest. It wasn't a marked trail, just old logging roads and miles of dense trees. Once you step deep enough in there, your phone is useless. That isolation was the reason I chose it. The first day was calm and quiet. Cool air, damp, leaves the steady sound of a creek nearby. I set up camp about 6 miles from my truck. There was no traffic noise, no distant hum of civilization, just wind brushing through branches. Around 1:30 that night, I woke to the sound of footsteps and dry leaves. At first I assumed it was a deer passing through. I stayed still inside my tent and listened carefully. The steps were slow and deliberate, not scattered like an animal grazing. Then the sound stopped right outside my tent. I held my breath, waiting for a snort or a shift in weight. Nothing came. After a long pause, the steps started again and began circling my tent. It made one full circle, then another. The weight sounded heavier than any deer I'd heard before. My chest tightened as the silence in the forest grew thick. No insects, no wind, just that presence. I finally grabbed my headlamp and unzipped the tent quickly. My light cut through the darkness and mist from the creek. There was nothing there. No movement, no sound of retreat. Before dawn, I heard something else. Low breathing from the trees about 20 feet away. Slow inhale, long exhale, steady and controlled. I lay frozen until sunlight finally pushed through. In the morning, I found impressions in the mud near the creek. They looked like large, bare human footprints. There were no other vehicles at the trailhead when I arrived. The prints led into the trees behind my tent. I should have packed up and left right then. Instead, I convinced myself there had to be a logical explanation. Maybe a hunter, maybe someone camping deeper in. I tried to ignore the feeling in my gut. Later that afternoon, I found a small clearing with a makeshift lean to build from branches and tarp scraps. It looked old, but recently disturbed. There were crushed leaves and a torn sleeping bag on the ground. Hanging from a branch was a small red strip of fabric. It was from my backpack. I had noticed a strap missing that morning, but assumed it tore off on brush. Someone had been close enough to my tent while I slept to cut it. I hadn't heard a thing. As I stood there staring at it, I heard a whistle. 2 short notes, clear and intentional. It came from behind me. I turned quickly, but the clearing was empty. The trees felt tighter now, like they were closing in around me. On the way back to camp, I heard movement paralleling me through the woods. Branches snapped softly, matching my pace. Every time I stopped, it stopped. Every time I walked, it followed. When I reached my campsite, my tent was unzipped. I know I closed it. Inside, nothing was stolen, but my sleeping bag had been dragged slightly toward the door. On top of it were 3 small stones stacked carefully. That detail unsettled me more than anything else. It felt deliberate, almost like a message. I packed quickly, my hands shaking the entire time. The forest felt like it was watching me. Then I heard the whistle again, 2 short notes, much closer this time. I walked fast, nearly running. Once I caught a glimpse of a tall shape moving between trees about 50 yards back. I never saw a clear face, but I felt the stare. A few miles from the trailhead, I realized something was wrong. The landmarks didn't match what I remembered. I had been subtly redirected off course. I checked my compass and corrected my path. That's when I heard footsteps behind me, no longer hiding. They were fast and closing in. I ran. Branches scraped my arms, and my breath burned in my chest. The footsteps matched my speed for several seconds. Then suddenly they stopped. I didn't slow down until I saw my truck through the trees. I threw my pack in and jumped inside. As I started the engine, I glanced at the tree line. About 30 yards back stood a tall, thin figure in dark clothing. I couldn't see the face clearly, but I saw the head tilt slightly. Even from that distance, I heard 2 short whistles. I drove out fast and didn't stop until I reached the highway. Later, when I unpacked at home, I found something at the bottom of my bag that wasn't mine. It was a smooth, flat stone. Carved into it were 3 lines. 2 short, 1 long. The same pattern as the whistle. I never went back to that forest. I don't camp alone anymore. Because sometimes the wilderness isn't empty, and sometimes something is watching you the entire time.